Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's April 9th, 2020, and I recently got a question from Cabo about, can you explain to me the purpose of the pussy willow on the homestead? And I could go off on this pretty far with talking about the various types of willows that are really beneficial and some of the hazards with the willows, and I'll just mention a couple things. So Thea and I both love the large weeping willows, and we have a few of those on property, and they're absolutely gorgeous, especially when the wind is blowing. They make such a wonderful canopy to get underneath. It's a really nice nesting site for many of the birds as well. It certainly is good for beneficial insects, and I'll be talking more about that when I get to the pussy willow. We have the variegated flamingo willow here as well, and there's so many different varieties of these different willows, and there's the close relatives like the quaking aspen and poplar trees as well. But you know, the willow varieties, they really love being in wet areas. And we've created many wet areas here on our property with 7 ponds, canals, swale systems, and all. And when I think about a homestead and I think about the pussy willow and specifically, I think about them as not being as hazardous when we have high winds. So we aren't going to have as many, pussy willow trees or bushes getting knocked over. One of the things I absolutely love about these, now these are a dioecious plant, meaning that there's both male and female plants, but they're on separate plants. So these catkins that we see, these ones here are some male catkins. They'll be producing a beautiful bright yellow pollen pretty soon, and there's nectar there as well. So this is really wonderful for all the beneficial insects and butterflies as well. So we'll get all of those honeybees and mason bees and all the small beneficial insects and flies going to these and gathering up the pollen. And you know, this is one of those early spring staples for the honeybees. So the honeybees are really, when they first come out in the springtime, they really need flowers. They need a source of nectar and pollen. And with the male catkins, or the male form of the pussy willows, these are some of the most are the earliest in the spring to actually show up in this part of the country. So I propagate lots of these so that the honeybees have lots of pollen and nectar in the very early spring. So how do these ones get their flowers and their stamens and the pollen out there so early in the spring? It's because if you look at these catkins, they're furry and just like a small mammal is, and that creates an insulation blanket that helps to protect them from the frost that's going to happen overnight time. So the bud doesn't actually die as a result of these frosts that we get in the early spring. So we get deep frosts all the way up until almost the end of May. And we'll see these at the very end of March and the beginning of April. So right now, these pussy willows are opening up. They're starting to produce their pollen and nectar as well. The honeybees and all the beneficial insects will go to these as well. So there are many other benefits that they have. So your willows certainly have rooting hormones or rooting compounds that are used, and you'll see many videos with people using willow leaves and the new growth of willows for being a beneficial rooting compound for starting other hardwood cuttings or starting leaf cuttings, whatever it may be. Certainly their medicinal benefits are pretty well documented. The synthetic aspirin comes from the salix from the willow trees. It's quite a bit different, the synthetic form, than the original form, but there are medicinal qualities for these for the willows. So how do I think about using pussy willows on site? Well, one of the big things, as I already mentioned, is they aren't as prone to the high wind speeds that we have here on our site. And they like the low wet spots. So what do we have? We have swales all around in our food forest areas. And on our food forest areas, we want to have an integrative approach. So we incorporate farmscaping, living fences, and hedgerows. And hedgerows are part of farmscaping. And when we think about these things, and I've made videos on each one of these topics in the past, so living fences, we could have that as a visual barrier, we could have it as a snow barrier, it could be a property barrier, it could be a wind barrier, a whole variety of things. But as the type of living fences that we create here, and there's 3 different ones that I've got started so far, and we'll do some walk around videos as everything starts growing. But we want to integrate diversity in each one of the living fences to bring in the beneficial insects, to create polycultures where each plant contributes to the microbes in the soil that have a mutually beneficial relationship, a symbiotic relationship with those plants located in the same area, so that they require minimal input from us and they can provide each other with all of their conspecific benefits. And they happen to create habitats and niches, and they create attractants for different times of the year, for whether it's berry producing habitats for species, for everything from reptiles to mammals to amphibians and so on. So living fences are an integral part of our property to provide multi-functions. And everything that we integrate on the property, we want to have multiple functions from each element. And then we want to integrate and not segregate, and we want to have these be a combination of beneficial effects that are mutually beneficial to the others. With farmscaping, hedgerows are used on this property as a contributing element of farmscaping. So farmscaping, it's an organic way of doing integrative pest management. So there's pests on your property. So you may want to have some beneficial predators, everything from beneficial birds of prey to keep the birds who are going to eat all your berries under control, to keeping beneficial toads that can keep some of the voles under control. So we want to integrate the types of plant systems in the soil soil conditions and sections on your property that do all the things you want it to do. So the pussy willows can go right into the margins of some of the swale systems. And we can integrate other marsh-loving plants in there as well, so that any phosphates or nitrates that come out of the soil and work their way into the swale systems, those will all be bioremediated as a result of all of the beneficial plant systems that are put there, which create habitats for transient aquatic species to full-time aquatic species as well, such as in the ponds and canal systems, where the swales will be transitory. The other thing I would say about farmscaping is, ultimately, I've talked about this before, I want to have all cover crops that we're using, so we're not leaving the soil barren as well. And a big part of the farmscaping are the hedgerows. And so up where the shallots and the garlic that I planted this fall, and those are all permanent raised beds over a large hugelkultur pit system, there's a swale system alongside of that. And we're having multiple layers or rows of various hedgerow systems. And some of the hedgerow systems will be gooseberries, which are a thorned bush berry producing plant system. And there will be barrage plants and lupine plants put there as well. So having the various types of plant species in various hedgerows creates habitats, creates food resources for the beneficial insects, the predatory insects as well. and creates these little niches, these little spots, these habitat places for the various species to come in and take up residence in those areas. And these are next to the raised beds that we're growing either our annuals or perennial plants as well. And that's surrounded by the food forest, which is another form of integrative polyculture system that has multiple layers to the strata, from canopy plants, the canopy trees, or the subcanopy trees, to the bushes, to the rhizomes, the root zone plants, the vining plants as well. So what we're trying to do in those cases is mimic what we see in foods in a forest system, but planning it so that we integrate mutually beneficial types of plants that produce various foods and other resources for the other inhabitants that can help us along the way. So I hope that all makes sense. So back to the pussy willow. It's that very early springtime plant that produces, the male does, it produces the pollen and the nectar for the honeybees that are there and all of the other beneficial insects, so that when some of our flowers open, so we have various fruit trees that and nut trees that produce flowers first before they leaf out early in the springtime, and we want them to be pollinated as much as possible. So having the real early blush of the pussy willow helps out in that respect. So, Kabu, I bet you didn't ask for all that information. So I think that's about it, all I'm going to say about the pussy willow. I think not only are they a beautiful plant, they're a manageable plant, and if you got spots where there's wet spots on your property, it can be one of the plants that you integrate into a system. And I'm always encouraging people to think of polycultures. You don't want to just put one type of plant in a fence row or in your garden or whatever. You want to integrate plants, and each of them have needs that could be met by another plant, and they have benefits that can help another plant as well, and help us at the same time. Whether it's food, fuel, fiber, fun, pharmacy, whatever, we always want to get some sort of benefit out of it if at all possible, if it isn't meeting the needs of other plants as well. So if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. And by all means, folks, stay safe and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.